visionary, connected, intentional, and present. This relates to what Maggie was talking about. The presence is really an important part of it. I have been asked for 23 years, what do women need to do to develop a stronger leadership presence? Is it the voice? Is it how they move? Is it posture? Should we not carry purses with us? Are we carrying too much junk around? And does that impact all these cosmetic things? Yes, they're important. I mean, one of the things I learned this weekend was, forget this. You know, being able to be open. There are a lot of cosmetic things that are really important. But really, when you study highly effective leaders, what you find is that they are present. And that presence is where, that being present is required for real leadership presence. It is difficult in this 24/7 environment where we have all the destabilizing forces that Maggie addressed and that were reinforced in the social media portion, that we are constantly being destabilized by the demands of this rich 24/7 technological environment. And I submit and believe that this is often more difficult for women, not only because we take pride in our ability to multitask, but it is more difficult for women because we are more likely to be destabilized by our radar. So we've got yet one other thing going on. We've got all these things we're trying to do, but yet we're noticing the reaction that other people are having in the room. And this is particularly challenging for young women. I've done a lot of work recently with some girls' schools, and one of the heads of school at an institution in Massachusetts said, you know, when I think of this broad spectrum notice now, I see that I see that there's a shadow side of it with young girls, that their constant noticing can make them almost paranoid and always focusing on, do they like me? Where, you know, what is my status? Here's a photo of me making cookies. Here's a photo of me, you know, with my new dog, putting it out there and really, you know, soliciting what are people thinking of me, and that it can be very destabilizing. So we've got a lot to work against here in this environment, given the radar and given the technology, to be able to remain present and to do what Julie puts so powerfully, which is to find that still point. That still point where we can have that leadership presence, not just because we're not schlepping a purse, but we can have that leadership presence because we're really there and the mirror neurons are firing with other people and they feel seen and they feel loved and they feel trust and they're willing to buy into what your vision is if they authentically think it has value, because you have presented that with real authority and impact and power. And to do that, I think one of the things I often talk about is we need to be our own HR departments. HR can't have these blanket policies anymore for how we're going to handle our technology. Each of us needs to think about and give permission to younger people who are experimenting with what makes us most effective. What gives us the greatest capacity to be thoughtful, to be reflective, to be creative, to be innovative? What are our own personal policies around interacting with the technology? That is a huge part of being an intentional leader. And how can we support others in finding where that sweet spot is for them? So that idea of being your own HR department, really important. The multitasking thing, I would say, avoid addictive multitasking. None of us can walk away from here. We can go on a digital diet, but it's not going to last for our lives. And none of us can walk out of here and say, I'm not going to multitask. That's not going to happen. But we can avoid its addictive nature. And it is highly addictive. And it is particularly addictive in young people, as their brains are forming those synapses that enable them to be present or not. So limiting that addictive nature of multitasking is important. And finally, I would suggest also finding a practice that enables you every day to be present. And it could be meditation, but it could be something like driving. When I'm driving, I am going to be driving. When I'm sitting, I'm going to sit. When I stand, I'm going to stand. When I walk, I'm going to walk. And when I lie down, I'm going to lie down. Having a practice that enables you. I'm working with a guy who works with performance driving right now as a way to be more fully present. Fascinating stuff. We can find that it might be time with an animal. The most powerful example of leadership presence, personally, I have ever witnessed is those early episodes of César and the Dog Whisperer. Because you can't fool a dog. They know if you're present. They know if you're not. So we have opportunities every day to incorporate some of that in our lives and to have that practice so that we can be present, be intentional, and be connected for what our vision is. I think that this is the direction that we'll be in. I think in 10 years from now, that if we can think about how to incorporate some of this information, I know this will work because I've seen it work in the past and I've seen how it works. So this is what keeps me optimistic. This is what keeps me focused despite some conflicting signals on the extraordinary opportunities that you have out there and that we have to begin to shape organizations and institutions to be more humane and places that nurture the human spirit more strongly so they can use talent in a more effective way in this very talent-dependent century that we're moving into.